The grey sky of a heavy afternoon covers a safari ranch in the middle of nowhere. A rich businessman drives his black Jeep to the edge of a man-made lake, far from any eyes. In the back seat, his teenage daughter in a wheelchair watches silently as the engine shuts off. Without a word, he gets out, opens the door and pulls the girl by her arms. In the background, a caged lion lifts its head and stares at the scene. With one final shove, the father throws her into the murky water. As her body sinks, the lion slams against the rusted bars. And for a moment, everything stops. Love stories with animals. Then subscribe now and never miss one. Thanks for following us. Now, back to our story. The Texas sun cast long shadows across the sprawling Mitchell Safari Ranch where Robert Mitchell stood on the wraparound porch of his magnificent colonial mansion, surveying his empire with the satisfaction of a man who had built everything from scratch. The property stretched for miles in every direction, encompassing over 3,000 acres of carefully maintained habitat that housed exotic animals from around the world. Lions, zebras, giraffes, and dozens of other species roamed in spacious enclosures designed to mimic their natural environments, while wealthy tourists paid premium prices for guided safari tours through what Robert proudly called Africa in America. At 52, Robert Mitchell embodied the American dream of success. His steel gray hair was always perfectly styled, his custom-tailored suits never wrinkled, and his confident stride spoke of a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. The Mitchell Safari Ranch had made him a multi-millionaire, turning his childhood fascination with wildlife into a business empire that attracted celebrities, politicians, and foreign dignitaries to the heart of Texas. The ranch employed over 40 people, from experienced animal handlers to hospitality staff who catered to the every whim of their elite clientele. The main lodge, built to resemble a luxury African safari camp, featured hand-carved furniture imported from Kenya, authentic tribal artifacts, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the artificial savanna Robert had created. Everything about the place screamed success, precision, and control. But there was one aspect of Robert's life that didn't fit the perfect image he had cultivated: his 17-year-old daughter, Emily. Emily Mitchell had been born with cerebral palsy, a condition that affected her mobility and made verbal communication challenging. While her mind was sharp and her heart full of compassion, her physical limitations required constant care and attention that Robert found increasingly difficult to manage as his business grew. Over the years, he had distanced himself from his daughter, leaving her care to a rotating team of nurses and therapists while he focused on maintaining his empire. The girl spent most of her days in her specially equipped room on the ground floor of the mansion, or in the enclosed garden area designed for her safety. Her wheelchair was state-of-the-art, her medical care the best money could buy. But what Emily craved most was something her father seemed incapable of giving: genuine love and acceptance. Emily's mother had passed away when she was just 3 years old, leaving Robert to raise her alone. He had tried in his own way, but the demanding nature of running the safari ranch and his discomfort with his daughter's condition had gradually widened the distance between them. To Robert, Emily represented a complication in his otherwise perfectly orchestrated life, a reminder that some things couldn't be controlled or fixed with money and determination. Despite her father's emotional absence, Emily had developed an extraordinary connection with the animals on the ranch. From her garden area, she could see several of the enclosures, and she spent hours watching the animals with a fascination that bordered on magical. The zebras would approach the fence when they saw her. The giraffes would bend their long necks in her direction, and the various antelope species seemed to sense her gentle presence. But it was Caesar, the magnificent African lion, who held a special place in Emily's heart. Caesar had arrived at the ranch 5 years earlier, rescued from a failing circus that had mistreated him. The lion was already 8 years old when he came to the Mitchell Safari Ranch, scarred both physically and emotionally from years of poor treatment. While most visitors were content to admire him from a safe distance during the guided tours, Emily had formed an inexplicable bond with the powerful predator. Every afternoon, weather permitting, Emily would position her wheelchair near the lion's enclosure, which was visible from her garden area. Caesar, despite his wild nature and traumatic past, seemed to recognize something in the young girl that others couldn't see. He would approach the fence when she was near, lying down in a position where they could observe each other peacefully. Marcus Thompson, a 35-year-old animal handler who had worked at the ranch for over a decade, was one of the few people who had noticed this unique relationship. Marcus had grown up on a cattle ranch in Oklahoma and had always possessed an intuitive understanding of animals. He was also one of the few employees who showed genuine kindness toward Emily, often stopping to chat with her during his rounds and keeping her company when her father was away on business trips. "She has a gift," Marcus would often tell Linda, and Jake Peterson, the couple who managed the guest lodge and had become Emily's unofficial caregivers in recent years. "I've never seen anything like the way animals respond to her. It's like they can sense something pure and innocent about her that the rest of us have lost." Linda Peterson, a warm-hearted woman in her early 40s, had worked at the ranch for 8 years alongside her husband, Jake. They had never been able to have children of their own, and Emily had gradually filled a void in their hearts that they hadn't even realized existed. While Robert was often away on business or entertaining important clients, Linda made sure Emily had everything she needed, from helping with her physical therapy exercises to simply sitting with her and listening to her favorite music. Jake Peterson, a skilled maintenance supervisor and former Marine, was responsible for keeping all the enclosures and facilities in perfect condition. His attention to detail and strong work ethic had earned Robert's respect, but more importantly, Jake had become a protective figure in Emily's life. He modified playground equipment to make it accessible for her wheelchair, installed special railings in the garden, and even built an elevated viewing platform where Emily could get a better view of her beloved animals. The ranch operated like a well-oiled machine under Robert's demanding management. Tour groups arrived daily in custom safari vehicles, guided by knowledgeable staff who shared fascinating facts about each species while maintaining safe distances from the animals. The gift shop sold expensive souvenirs. The restaurant served gourmet meals inspired by African cuisine, and the overnight accommodations rivaled those of five-star hotels. Robert prided himself on running the most successful private safari operation in the United States. He had been featured on the covers of business magazines, interviewed on television programs, and invited to speak at conferences around the world. Politicians courted his support, celebrities sought invitations to his exclusive events, and international wildlife organizations praised his conservation efforts. But beneath the surface of this perfect success story, cracks were beginning to show. The ranch's operating costs had skyrocketed in recent years as Robert continued to expand and upgrade facilities to stay ahead of the competition. The exotic animals required specialized veterinary care, the staff demanded higher wages, and the constant maintenance of such a large property consumed enormous resources. Additionally, Robert had made some questionable financial decisions, including several high-risk investments that had failed to pay off as expected. Still, Robert maintained his confident facade, believing that his reputation and business acumen would see him through any temporary difficulties. He continued to live lavishly, spending money on custom suits, expensive cars, and luxurious trips to acquire new animals for the ranch. To everyone around him, including his own employees, Robert Mitchell appeared to be at the pinnacle of success. Only His accountant and a few key business partners knew that the Mitchell Safari Ranch was facing serious financial challenges that threatened to destroy everything Robert had built. The bank loans were becoming increasingly difficult to manage. Several major investors were asking uncomfortable questions, and government regulators had begun taking a closer look at some of the ranch's business practices. As the sun began to set over the Texas landscape, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Emily sat in her garden, watching Caesar pace majestically in his enclosure. The lion's golden mane caught the last rays of daylight, and for a moment, their eyes met across the distance. In that silent exchange, there was the understanding that transcended the barriers between human and animal, between the confined and the free. Neither Emily nor Caesar could have known that their lives were about to change in ways that would shock everyone around them, revealing truths about love, loyalty, and the unexpected connections that bind all living creatures together. The stage was set for a drama that would challenge everything Robert Mitchell believed about control, success, and the true meaning of family. 3 weeks after that peaceful sunset moment, the first signs of trouble began to surface at the Mitchell Safari Ranch. Robert stood in his mahogany-paneled office, staring at financial documents spread across his massive desk like battle plans for a war he wasn't sure he could win. The numbers told a story he didn't want to accept. Despite the ranch's apparent success, the operation was bleeding money at an alarming rate. His accountant, David Chen, had been trying to schedule an urgent meeting for days, but Robert had been avoiding the conversation he knew was coming. When David finally cornered him that Tuesday morning, the news was worse than Robert had imagined. The wildlife feed costs alone have increased 40% this year, David explained, his usually calm demeanor showing signs of stress. The new African elephant exhibit cost 3 times more than projected, and the insurance premiums have skyrocketed after that incident with the aggressive rhino last month. We're looking at a $2 million shortfall for the quarter. Robert loosened his silk tie, feeling the walls of his perfect world beginning to close in. The ranch had always been more than a business to him. It was a symbol of his success, proof that a small-town Texas boy could build something extraordinary. The thought of losing it was unthinkable. "What about the Peterson deal?" Robert asked, referring to a potential partnership with a major hotel chain that wanted to build a luxury resort adjacent to the ranch. "That would bring in the capital we need." David shook his head grimly. "They pulled out yesterday. Apparently their environmental impact study raised some concerns about our waste management systems. They're worried about negative publicity." The weight of the situation settled heavily on Robert's shoulders. For years, he had leveraged everything he owned to expand the ranch, confident that bigger meant better and that success would always continue to grow. Now, for the first time in his adult life, he was facing the possibility of losing everything he had worked to build. Meanwhile, Emily was experiencing one of her best days in months. The morning therapy session with Dr. Sarah Williams had gone exceptionally well, and Emily had successfully communicated several complete thoughts using her tablet device. Dr. Williams, a specialist in assistive technology, had been working with Emily for over a year to help her express herself more effectively. "Your progress is remarkable, Emily," Dr. Williams said as they finished their session in the sunlit therapy room. "Your cognitive abilities have always been strong, but now we're finding better ways for you to share your thoughts with the world. I'm particularly impressed by how you describe your observations of the animals here." Emily's eyes lit up as she carefully selected words on her tablet screen. The device's voice synthesizer spoke her thoughts aloud. "Animals understand feelings. They see truth in people. Caesar knows when I am sad or happy." Dr. Williams nodded thoughtfully. She had noticed Emily's unusual connection with the ranch's wildlife during their outdoor sessions. Unlike most teenagers, Emily seemed to possess an intuitive understanding of animal behavior that impressed even the experienced handlers. After her therapy session, Emily made her way to her favorite spot in the garden, where she had a clear view of Caesar's enclosure. The magnificent lion was resting in the shade of an artificial baobab tree, but he lifted his massive head when he sensed her approach. Their daily ritual of silent communication began as it always did, with mutual recognition and respect. Marcus was nearby, conducting his afternoon inspection of the security systems. Since the incident with the aggressive rhino, Robert had mandated additional safety measures throughout the ranch, including upgraded fencing and improved surveillance cameras. As Marcus checked the camera angles around Caesar's enclosure, he noticed Emily in her usual spot. "Hey there, Emily," Marcus called out with a warm smile. "Having a good visit with our king today?" Emily turned toward Marcus and activated her tablet. "Caesar seems worried today. His posture is different. Something is bothering him." Marcus looked more carefully at the lion and realized Emily was right. Caesar's ears were positioned differently than usual, and he kept looking toward the main entrance of the ranch. Marcus had learned to trust Emily's observations about the animals. Her insights had proven accurate more times than he could count. "You might be onto something," Marcus said. "There's been a lot of unusual activity around here lately. Lots of serious-looking people in suits visiting your father's office." As if summoned by their conversation, Robert emerged from the main building with two men in expensive business suits. Even from a distance, Emily could see the tension in her father's posture. She had always been sensitive to people's emotions, and the anxiety radiating from the group was palpable. The men were representatives from First National Bank of Texas, and they had come to deliver an ultimatum that would change everything for the Mitchell family. Robert's loan payments were severely behind schedule, and the bank was no longer willing to extend additional credit without immediate action. "Mr. Mitchell, we've been more than patient," said the senior banker, Thomas Harrison. "The ranch is a valuable asset, but your debt-to-income ratio is simply unsustainable. We need to see a concrete plan for repayment within 30 days, or we'll have no choice but to begin foreclosure proceedings." The word foreclosure hit Robert like a physical blow. He had always prided himself on being in control, on having solutions for every problem. But now, faced with the very real possibility of losing his life's work, he felt desperate and cornered. "Gentlemen, I understand your position," Robert said, trying to maintain his composure. "The ranch has tremendous value, and I'm exploring several options to resolve this temporary cash flow issue. I just need a little more time." The bankers exchanged skeptical glances. They had heard similar promises from other struggling business owners, and they knew that desperate men often made desperate decisions. After the bankers left, Robert stood alone in his office, staring out the window at the empire he had built and might soon lose. The ranch employed dozens of people who depended on him for their livelihoods. The animals required constant care and feeding. The mortgage payments, insurance premiums, and operational costs continued regardless of his financial difficulties. For the first time, Robert found himself looking at Emily, not as his daughter, but as a burden that complicated an already impossible situation. Her medical expenses, therapy costs, and specialized care represented a significant drain on the family's resources. In his darkening mood, Robert began to see Emily's needs as obstacles to his financial recovery. These thoughts disturbed him even as they formed, but desperation has a way of twisting a person's perspective. Robert had always been able to solve problems with money, determination, and strategic thinking. But Emily's condition couldn't be fixed, couldn't be improved with better business decisions, and would require costly care for the rest of her life. Linda. Peterson noticed the change in Robert's demeanor during dinner that evening. She had prepared Emily's favorite meal and was helping her eat when Robert entered the dining room with a distracted, almost hostile expression. "How much did the new communication device cost?" Robert asked abruptly, gesturing toward Emily's tablet. Linda was surprised by the question. "Dr. Williams arranged for insurance to cover most of it," she replied carefully. "The monthly therapy sessions are the bigger expense." Robert's jaw tightened. Everything costs money. Every modification to the house, every piece of specialized equipment, every medical appointment, it never ends. Emily looked up at her father with confusion and hurt in her eyes. She had always sensed his emotional distance, but this was the first time she had heard him express resentment about her care so directly. Her tablet sat silent on the table. There were no words for the pain she felt. Jake Peterson entered the dining room at that moment, having overheard the conversation from the hallway. His protective instincts toward Emily flared, but he maintained his professional composure. "Emily brings joy to everyone who works here," Jake said firmly. "The staff loves her, and she has a special gift with the animals that's remarkable to witness. She's not a burden, Mr. Mitchell. She's a blessing." Robert's face flushed with anger at being challenged by an employee, but he also felt a flicker of shame at his own words. He left the dining room without another word, leaving Emily to process the emotional wound he had inflicted. That night, as Emily lay in her specially designed bed, she could hear her father on the phone in his office, his voice rising and falling with frustration as he tried to negotiate with creditors and potential investors. The sound of his distress mixed with her own hurt feelings, creating a storm of emotions she couldn't fully understand. Outside her window, the ranch continued its nighttime rhythms. The nocturnal animals moved through their enclosures, guided by instincts that had kept their species alive for millions of years. Caesar stood at the edge of his territory, his golden eyes reflecting the security lights as he gazed toward the main house where his young friend was learning painful lessons about human nature. The stage was being set for events that would test every relationship on the ranch and reveal truths about loyalty, love, and survival that none of them could have anticipated. The following week brought news that shattered what remained of Robert's composure. A surprise audit by the Texas Department of Agriculture had uncovered irregularities in the ranch's animal acquisition records, raising questions about the legitimacy of several recent purchases. The investigation threatened not only the ranch's operating licenses, but also Robert's reputation in the wildlife conservation community. Sarah Martinez, an investigative reporter from the Dallas Morning News, had been following the story since receiving an anonymous tip about the ranch's financial troubles. She was a tenacious journalist known for exposing corruption in high-profile cases, and something about the Mitchell Safari Ranch story intrigued her beyond the typical business failure narrative. Sarah had spent 3 days gathering background information before arriving at the ranch under the pretense of writing a feature story about exotic animal conservation in Texas. Robert, despite his current troubles, couldn't resist the opportunity for positive publicity and agreed to give her a comprehensive tour of the facilities. The Mitchell Safari Ranch represents the future of wildlife conservation, Robert told Sarah as they rode through the property in his custom safari vehicle. We're not just displaying animals, we're preserving species and educating the public about the importance of protecting these magnificent creatures. Sarah nodded politely while taking notes, but her trained eye was cataloging details that didn't match Robert's polished presentation. Several enclosures showed signs of deferred maintenance. The staff seemed nervous and overworked, and there was an underlying tension that suggested all was not well in this supposed paradise. During the tour, they passed Emily's garden area, where she was having her afternoon session with Caesar. Sarah was immediately struck by the obvious connection between the girl and the powerful predator. "That's quite remarkable," Sarah commented. "How long has she had that relationship with the lion?" Robert's expression darkened slightly. "Emily spends too much time with the animals. It's not healthy for someone in her condition to become so obsessed with creatures she can never truly interact with safely." Sarah sensed there was more to the story, but Robert quickly redirected the conversation to the ranch's conservation efforts. However, she made a mental note to learn more about Emily and her relationship with the animals. After the tour, Sarah asked to speak with some of the ranch employees. Robert reluctantly agreed, confident that his staff would present the ranch in a positive light. He was wrong. Marcus Thompson, usually diplomatic in his interactions with visitors, found himself drawn to Sarah's genuine interest in animal welfare. When she asked about Emily's connection with the animals, Marcus couldn't hide his admiration for the young girl. "Emily has a gift," Marcus told Sarah privately. "She understands these animals in ways that most people never could." Caesar, our male lion, was aggressive and traumatized when he first arrived here from that circus. Emily was the first person he trusted. She somehow knew exactly how to approach him, how to give him the space he needed while still showing him kindness. Sarah's investigative instincts were fully activated now. And her father? How does he feel about this special connection? Marcus hesitated, loyalty to his employer warring with his concern for Emily. "Mr. Mitchell is under a lot of pressure lately. The ranch is facing some challenges. I think it's affecting his judgment about a lot of things, including his relationship with his daughter." Meanwhile, Linda Peterson was helping Emily with her physical therapy exercises when they were interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Dr. Janet Reynolds, a child psychologist who specialized in working with disabled children, had been contacted by someone concerned about Emily's welfare. "I received a call suggesting that Emily might benefit from some additional psychological support during what seems to be a difficult time for your family," Dr. Reynolds explained to Linda. "I understand there have been some recent stresses that might be affecting her emotional well-being." Linda was puzzled. "Emily seems to be doing well with her current therapy program. Dr. Williams has been wonderful, and Emily has been making excellent progress with her communication skills." Dr. Reynolds nodded. "I'm sure she has been. But sometimes children with disabilities are particularly sensitive to family tensions, even when the adults think they're hiding their stress successfully. I'd like to spend some time with Emily, just to make sure she's processing everything in a healthy way." The session with Dr. Reynolds revealed more than anyone expected. Emily, using her communication tablet, expressed feelings that surprised the adults around her. She had been acutely aware of her father's growing resentment and financial stress, and she blamed herself for being a burden on the family. "Father wishes I was different," Emily's tablet announced in its mechanical voice. "I cost too much money. I cannot help with ranch work. I'm only problem to solve." Dr. Reynolds was deeply concerned by these revelations. In her professional experience, children who felt they were burdens to their families often experienced severe depression and sometimes developed dangerous thoughts about their own worth. "Emily, you are not a burden," Dr. Reynolds said gently. "You are a valuable person with unique gifts and talents. Your ability to connect with animals is extraordinary, and the people who work here clearly love and respect you." But Emily's tablet remained silent. The damage to her self-esteem was already taking root, planted by her father's increasing coldness and watered by his obvious stress about money. That evening, Robert received the final blow to his crumbling empire. His lawyer called with devastating news. The state investigation had uncovered evidence of falsified documents related to several animal acquisitions. While the violations weren't criminal, they were serious enough to result in massive fines and the potential loss of the ranch's operating licenses. "How is this possible?" Robert demanded, his voice rising to near shouting levels. "Every transaction was handled by professionals. Every document was processed correctly." His lawyer's voice was grim. "It appears that some of the certificates of origin were forged or altered. The investigators believe it was done to avoid certain import restrictions and fees." "Robert, this could shut down the entire operation if we can't prove you had no knowledge of the falsifications." Robert slammed the phone down, his hands shaking with rage and fear. 20 years of building his empire, and it was all falling apart because of paperwork irregularities he claimed to know nothing about. The financial pressures, the threats of foreclosure, and now this regulatory nightmare were combining into a perfect storm that threatened to destroy everything he had worked for. In his darkest moment, Robert found himself thinking thoughts that would have horrified him under normal circumstances. If Emily wasn't part of the equation, he could sell the ranch, pay off his debts, and start over somewhere else. Her ongoing medical needs and care requirements made any kind of fresh start nearly impossible. She would always be a financial drain, a constant reminder of his failures as a father and a businessman. These toxic thoughts festered in Robert's mind as he paced his office late into the night. Outside, the ranch continued its operations, but there was an undercurrent of uncertainty as word of the investigations began to spread among the staff. Everyone could sense that changes were coming, but no one could have predicted how desperate Robert's solutions would become. Jake Peterson was doing his final security check of the evening when he noticed that one of the fences around Caesar's enclosure showed signs of wear. The metal posts had been weakened by recent storms, and the chain link sections were pulling away from their supports. He made a note to repair it first thing in the morning, not knowing that this minor maintenance issue would soon play a crucial role in unfolding events. As the night deepened, Emily lay awake in her bed, listening to the sounds of the ranch and processing the emotional turmoil she had witnessed throughout the day. Her father's anger and frustration were palpable, even through the walls of the house. She could feel the weight of being unwanted, and for the first time in her young life, she began to wonder if everyone would be better off without her. Caesar, meanwhile, paced restlessly in his enclosure, his keen senses detecting the emotional distress that permeated the ranch. Lions are remarkably intuitive about human emotions, and Caesar had learned to read the complex dynamics of his human caretakers over the years. Something was wrong in his territory, and his protective instincts were beginning to stir. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test every relationship on the ranch and reveal the true character of everyone involved. The next 24 hours would bring revelations that would change the Mitchell family forever and force everyone to confront the difference between survival and living, between desperation and hope. The morning of what would become known as Miracle Thursday at the Mitchell Safari Ranch began with an ominous phone call that would push Robert Mitchell past his breaking point. His insurance company had just cancelled his policy due to the ongoing state investigation, leaving the ranch completely vulnerable and unprotectable. Without insurance, no bank would extend credit, no investor would consider partnership, and no buyer would seriously consider purchasing the property. Robert stood in his office at dawn, staring at foreclosure papers that had arrived by overnight courier. He had 72 hours to come up with $3.2 million or lose everything. The weight of complete financial ruin pressed down on him like a physical force, making it difficult to breathe, difficult to think clearly. In his twisted state of mind, Robert began to see Emily not just as a financial burden, but as the symbol of everything that had gone wrong in his life. If he had never had to worry about her expensive medical care, her specialized equipment, her ongoing therapy costs, he could have invested that money in the ranch. He could have prevented this disaster. These dark thoughts consumed him as he walked through the ranch in the early morning light, ostensibly checking on the animals, but actually wrestling with ideas that would have appalled him under normal circumstances. The artificial lake that served as a centerpiece for the guest lodge area caught his attention. It was deep, secluded, and surrounded by dense vegetation that blocked it from view of the main buildings. Emily had awakened early that morning with an unusual sense of unease. Her connection to the emotional atmosphere around her had always been strong, and today the ranch felt different. There was a heaviness in the air, a sense of impending change that made her restless and anxious. Dr. Williams had cancelled their morning therapy session due to a family emergency, leaving Emily with unexpected free time. She decided to use her motorized wheelchair to explore areas of the ranch she rarely visited, hoping the movement and fresh air would ease her troubled feelings. Marcus was conducting his morning animal health checks when he noticed that the weakened section of Caesar's fence had deteriorated further overnight. The chain link was now hanging loose in several places, held by only a few remaining connection points. He made a mental note to repair it immediately after finishing his rounds, but first he needed to complete his inspection of the other enclosures. Caesar had been restless all night, pacing his territory with an agitation that the other animals seemed to sense and share. His powerful instincts were detecting emotional distress from multiple sources, but most notably from the direction of the main house where Emily lived. Something was wrong with his young friend, and every fiber of his being urged him to investigate. Robert found Emily by the artificial lake around 10 o'clock that morning. She had wheeled herself to a scenic overlook that offered a peaceful view of the water, surrounded by imported palm trees and exotic flowering plants. The location was isolated from the main ranch activities, exactly what Robert's disturbed mind was seeking. "Emily," Robert said, his voice strangely calm despite the storm raging inside him. "I need to talk with you about some important changes that are coming." Emily turned toward her father, surprised by his presence and immediately sensing something different in his demeanor. His usual controlled business manner was gone, replaced by something she couldn't identify but instinctively feared. "The ranch is in serious trouble," Robert continued, approaching her wheelchair. "Financial trouble, legal trouble, problems that you can't understand. Everything I've worked for is falling apart, and I don't know how to fix it anymore." Emily activated her communication tablet, but Robert put his hand over the screen before she could type anything. "No, don't say anything, just listen. Your medical expenses, your therapy, your equipment, all of it has been a constant drain on our resources. If things had been different, if you had been different, maybe I could have prevented this disaster." The words cut through Emily like knives. She had always known her father saw her as a burden, but hearing it stated so directly was devastating. Tears began to form in her eyes as she struggled to understand why he was being so cruel. Robert's rational mind knew he was saying terrible things to his daughter, but the financial pressure and fear had twisted his thinking beyond recognition. In his desperation, he had convinced himself that if Emily were no longer part of the equation, he might still find a way to save the ranch. "I think it would be best for everyone if you weren't here to complicate things anymore," Robert said. his voice taking on a frighteningly calm tone. "The lake is beautiful, peaceful. It would be quick and painless, and then all of this would be over." Emily's eyes widened in terror as she realized what her father was suggesting. She frantically reached for her communication tablet, but Robert grabbed it and threw it aside, the device landing with a splash in the shallow water near the lake's edge. "Don't fight this, Emily. It's better for everyone this way." Meanwhile, several hundred yards away, Caesar had finally found the weak point in his enclosure that his restless pacing had been unconsciously seeking. The combination of storm damage and deferred maintenance had created a gap just large enough for the powerful lion to force his way through. For the first time in 5 years, Caesar was free to roam beyond the boundaries of his artificial territory. His acute hearing immediately picked up sounds of distress from the direction of the lake. Every instinct told him to investigate, to protect, to defend. Without hesitation, Caesar began moving through the ranch grounds with the silent grace that had made him an apex predator in the African wilderness. Marcus had just discovered the breach in Caesar's enclosure when he heard Emily's terrified cries echoing across the ranch grounds. The sound sent chills down his spine, and he immediately began running toward the source while simultaneously radioing for backup from other staff members. Robert had pushed Emily's wheelchair to the very edge of the lake, his intentions clear. Despite the voice in his head that was screaming this was wrong, Emily's physical limitations prevented her from effectively resisting, but her cries for help carried across the water with desperate intensity. "This is the only way," Robert kept repeating, as much to convince himself as to explain his actions to Emily. "You'll understand someday. This solves everything." But as Robert prepared to push the wheelchair into the deeper water, a sound unlike anything he had ever heard froze him in place. The roar of an angry lion, approaching at full speed, echoed through the morning air with primal fury that spoke to the deepest fears embedded in human DNA. Caesar burst through the vegetation surrounding the lake like a golden projectile of protective rage. His massive form, weighing over 400 pounds, moved with fluid grace despite his size. But instead of attacking Robert, as any reasonable person would expect, Caesar positioned himself directly between the man and Emily's wheelchair. The lion's message was unmistakable. To reach Emily, Robert would have to go through him first. Robert stumbled backwards, his business suit torn by branches, his face pale with shock. He had never seen Caesar outside of his enclosure, had never fully comprehended the raw power and intelligence that Emily had somehow recognized and befriended. Caesar approached Emily's wheelchair with gentle care, his earlier aggression melting away as he focused on his young friend. He nuzzled her hand with his massive head, offering comfort in the way that only animals seem capable of providing during moments of crisis. Emily's tears flowed freely, but now they were tears of relief and gratitude rather than terror. Through her sobs, she managed to whisper, "Thank you, Caesar. Thank you for saving me." Marcus arrived at the scene moments later, followed closely by Jake Peterson and several other ranch employees. The sight that greeted them was unlike anything they could have imagined. Robert Mitchell cowering against a tree while a lion stood guard over his daughter, offering protection and comfort. "Nobody move," Marcus called out softly. "Caesar's not aggressive right now, but we need to be very careful how we handle this." Jake Peterson's military training kicked in as he assessed the situation. It was immediately clear to him that Robert had intended harm toward Emily, and that Caesar had somehow intervened to prevent it. The evidence was overwhelming. Emily's communication device floating in the lake, her wheelchair positioned dangerously close to the water's edge, and Robert's guilty expression told the entire story. Sarah Martinez, who had returned to the ranch that morning for follow-up interviews, heard the commotion and arrived with her camera just in time to capture the most extraordinary scene of her journalistic career. The photographs she took would later become evidence in legal proceedings and symbols of hope for people around the world. The standoff continued for nearly an hour, while Marcus carefully coordinated Caesar's return to a temporary enclosure. Throughout the entire time, the lion remained protective of Emily, allowing only Marcus and Linda Peterson to approach close enough to check on her welfare. When Caesar was finally safely contained, Emily was rushed to the ranch's medical facility for evaluation. Physically, she was unharmed, but the emotional trauma of her father's betrayal would require extensive counseling and support. Robert was taken into custody by local authorities who had been called by Jake Peterson. As he was led away in handcuffs, he caught one last glimpse of Emily, surrounded by people who truly cared about her welfare. For the first time in months, his vision cleared enough to realize the magnitude of what he had almost done. The miracle at the Mitchell Safari Ranch would become international news within hours. But for those who witnessed it firsthand, the true miracle wasn't just that a lion had saved a girl. The miracle was that love and loyalty had triumphed over fear and desperation, proving that the bonds between living creatures transcend the artificial barriers that humans create. The hours following Caesar's heroic intervention transformed the Mitchell Safari Ranch from a place of hidden desperation into a beacon of hope that captured the world's attention. Sarah Martinez's photographs and video footage of the lion protecting Emily had gone viral within 6 hours, generating millions of views and an outpouring of support from animal lovers and human rights advocates around the globe. Emily was recovering in the ranch's medical facility under the care of Dr. Helen Morrison, the ranch's veterinarian, who also had training in emergency medicine. While Emily's physical condition was stable, the emotional trauma of her father's betrayal required delicate handling by a team of specialists who had been flown in from Dallas Children's Hospital. Dr. Reynolds, the child psychologist who had met Emily just days earlier, had immediately returned to provide crisis counseling. She sat beside Emily's bed, watching the young woman slowly process the events of the morning through a combination of tears, silence, and carefully chosen words on her communication tablet. "I knew Father did not love me," Emily's tablet announced, in its mechanical voice. "But I never thought he would try to hurt me. Why did Caesar save me when my own father wanted to harm me?" Dr. Reynolds chose her words carefully. "Sometimes animals understand love and loyalty better than humans do, Emily. Caesar recognized something pure and good in you that your father couldn't see because of his own pain and confusion, but that doesn't make what your father did acceptable or your fault in any way." The media attention surrounding the story had attracted representatives from several animal welfare organizations, including the World Wildlife Foundation and the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. They had arrived to ensure Caesar's safety and to investigate the overall conditions at the ranch. Dr. Amanda Foster, a renowned animal behaviorist from the University of California, had flown in specifically to study Caesar's protective behavior toward Emily. Her preliminary observations suggested that the bond between them represented something extraordinary in human-animal relationships. "In 30 years of studying large cats, I've never documented anything quite like this," Dr. Foster explained to the assembled media outside the ranch gates. "Caesar demonstrated not only protective instincts, but also emotional intelligence that challenges our understanding of lion behavior. He recognized Emily was in danger, assessed the threat, and took decisive action to protect her while showing remarkable restraint toward other humans in the area." Jake and Linda Peterson had been appointed as Emily's temporary guardians by Child Protective Services, a role they embraced with fierce dedication. Linda hadn't left Emily's side since the incident, providing the maternal comfort that Emily had been missing for most of her life. "We're going to take care of you no matter what happens," Linda promised, holding Emily's hand as they sat together in the medical facility. "You're safe now, and you're loved. Caesar showed us all what protection really means, and we're going to follow his example." Jake was working with authorities to secure the ranch's immediate future while the legal proceedings against Robert played out. The financial crisis that had driven Robert to desperation still existed, but the international attention had generated unexpected solutions. Within 24 hours of the story breaking, a crowdfunding campaign established by animal welfare advocates had raised over $2 million to support Emily's care and ensure Caesar's continued well-being. Corporate sponsors, moved by the story, were offering financial support and resources to help maintain the ranch as a legitimate wildlife sanctuary. Marcus Thompson found himself thrust into a leadership role as the ranch's acting manager. His deep knowledge of the animals and genuine care for their welfare made him the logical choice to oversee operations during the transition period. The stress of recent events hadn't diminished his commitment to the animals under his care. "Caesar's still agitated," Marcus reported to Dr. Foster during their afternoon consultation. "He keeps looking toward the main house and pacing along the fence line closest to Emily's location. It's like he knows she's still upset and wants to comfort her." Dr. Foster nodded thoughtfully. "Lions are incredibly social animals with complex emotional lives. Caesar has clearly formed an attachment to Emily that goes beyond normal human-animal interactions. We need to consider how to maintain that beneficial relationship while ensuring everyone's safety." The solution came from an unexpected source: Dr. Janet Sullivan, a specialist in animal-assisted therapy from the Texas Medical Center, had been following the story and reached out to offer her expertise. She proposed a carefully controlled program that would allow Emily and Caesar to continue their therapeutic relationship under professional supervision. Animal-assisted therapy has shown remarkable results for individuals with disabilities. Dr. Sullivan explained to the team of specialists now involved in Emily's care, the bond Emily shares with Caesar could be incredibly beneficial for her emotional recovery and long-term development. "We just need to create a safe framework for their interactions." Meanwhile, the investigation into the ranch's financial irregularities had taken an unexpected turn. Federal auditors, working with renewed urgency due to the media attention, had discovered that the falsified documents Robert had been blamed for were actually created by a former business partner who had embezzled funds from the ranch's accounts. This revelation didn't excuse Robert's actions toward Emily, but it did clear him of the fraud charges that had driven him to desperation. The discovery also opened the possibility of recovering stolen funds that could help stabilize the ranch's financial situation. Sarah Martinez continued her investigative work, but her focus had shifted from exposing corruption to documenting an inspiring story of resilience and redemption. Her daily reports from the ranch were being picked up by national news networks, bringing positive attention to wildlife conservation and disability awareness. "This story has touched something deep in people's hearts," Sarah reported during a live television broadcast from the ranch. "We're seeing an outpouring of support that goes far beyond the immediate crisis. People are responding to the pure love and loyalty demonstrated by both Caesar and the ranch staff, who truly care about Emily's welfare." Emily's recovery was progressing better than anyone had dared hope. The trauma of her father's betrayal would require ongoing therapy, but the overwhelming support from around the world was helping her rebuild her sense of self-worth and trust in human kindness. 3 days after the incident, Emily asked to see Caesar. The request sparked intense discussions among her medical team, but Dr. Sullivan's assessment convinced them that the reunion could be therapeutic for both Emily and the lion. The meeting was arranged in a specially designed area that allowed for safe interaction while providing security for everyone involved. When Emily arrived in her wheelchair, escorted by Linda and surrounded by animal experts, Caesar's reaction was immediate and touching. The massive lion approached the reinforced barrier and pressed his nose against the mesh, emitting a low rumble that experts recognized as a greeting call. Emily reached out to touch the barrier where Caesar's nose was positioned, and for several minutes they simply existed in each other's presence, drawing comfort from their unique connection. "Hello, my brave friend," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "Thank you for protecting me. I love you too." Caesar's response was a gentle chuff, the sound he had always made during their quiet moments together in the garden. The simplicity and purity of their interaction moved everyone present to tears. Dr. Foster documented the reunion with scientific precision, but even her professional objectivity couldn't mask her amazement at the emotional bond between them. "This represents something truly special in the animal kingdom," she noted. "Caesar recognizes Emily as someone under his protection, and Emily trusts Caesar completely, despite his physical power. It's a relationship built on mutual respect and genuine affection." As the sun set over the Texas landscape that evening, the ranch felt different than it had in months. The cloud of financial desperation had lifted, replaced by a sense of purpose and community that nobody had expected. The staff worked with renewed energy, knowing they were part of something meaningful that would continue long into the future. Emily sat in her garden area, now surrounded by additional security measures, but still able to see Caesar in his enclosure. The lion was resting peacefully, but his position was chosen to keep Emily in his line of sight. Their unique friendship had saved them both and created a legacy that would inspire others for years to come. The healing process was just beginning, but the foundation had been laid for something beautiful to emerge from the darkness of recent events. 6 weeks after the incident that changed everything, the Mitchell Safari Ranch had transformed into something Robert could never have imagined during his darkest hours. The legal proceedings had concluded with a resolution that surprised everyone involved, including Robert himself, who was now serving community service at a rehabilitation center for troubled fathers rather than facing prison time. The court had recognized that Robert's actions, while inexcusable, had been driven by a mental breakdown caused by extreme financial pressure and untreated depression. His cooperation with authorities in recovering the embezzled funds, combined with character testimony from unexpected sources, had resulted in a sentence focused on rehabilitation rather than punishment. Judge Margaret Thompson had made it clear during sentencing that Robert's path to redemption would be long and difficult. "Mr. Mitchell, you came dangerously close to committing an unforgivable act against your own daughter. The fact that a lion showed more paternal instinct than you did should be a source of lifelong shame and motivation for change." Emily had chosen not to attend the sentencing hearing, but she had submitted a written statement through her attorney that spoke to her father's mental state and her desire for his healing rather than his destruction. The maturity and compassion she displayed in that statement had moved court officials and demonstrated the remarkable strength of character that Caesar had recognized and protected. The formal adoption proceedings for Jake and Linda Peterson had been completed the previous week, making them Emily's legal parents and giving her the family stability she had never experienced. The ceremony had taken place at the ranch, with Caesar visible in the background as Emily signed her consent papers with hands that no longer trembled with fear. "I never thought I would have real parents who loved me for who I am," Emily had communicated through her tablet during the adoption ceremony. "Jake and Linda showed me what family really means, and Caesar taught me that protection comes from love, not fear." The financial transformation of the ranch had been equally dramatic. The international attention generated by Caesar's heroic actions had attracted legitimate investors who were passionate about wildlife conservation and disability advocacy. A consortium of environmental organizations had purchased the ranch from Roberts Estate, ensuring its future as a legitimate sanctuary while providing Emily with a trust fund for her ongoing care and education. Dr. Amanda Foster had remained at the ranch to establish a research center focused on human-animal therapeutic relationships. Her preliminary studies of Emily and Caesar's bond had attracted attention from universities around the world, bringing both scientific credibility and additional funding to the facility. What we're documenting here challenges conventional wisdom about animal consciousness and emotional intelligence, Dr. Foster explained to a visiting delegation from the National Science Foundation. Caesar's protective behavior toward Emily demonstrates cognitive and emotional complexity that we're only beginning to understand. The ranch now operated under a new mission statement that honored both wildlife conservation and disability advocacy. The gift shop had been transformed into an educational center where visitors could learn about animal behavior, conservation efforts, and the capabilities of individuals with disabilities. Emily had become an unofficial ambassador for both causes, sharing her story with visitors when she felt comfortable doing so. Marcus Thompson had been promoted to ranch director, a position that recognized his expertise and dedication to animal welfare. Under his leadership, the staff had grown to include specialists in animal behavior, disability services, and environmental education. The ranch was now a model facility that other organizations sought to emulate. "Emily changed all of our lives," Marcus reflected during a staff meeting. "She showed us that true strength comes from gentleness and that the most powerful connections are often the quietest ones." Caesar recognized that before any of us did. The therapeutic program designed around Emily and Caesar's relationship had expanded to include other individuals with disabilities. Under carefully controlled conditions, selected participants could interact with appropriate animals while receiving counseling and support. The program's success rate had exceeded all expectations, attracting attention from medical professionals worldwide. Dr. Janet Sullivan had relocated to Texas to oversee the therapy program full-time. Her research with Emily and Caesar was providing new insights into the healing power of human-animal bonds, particularly for individuals who had experienced trauma or lived with disabilities. Emily's progress has been remarkable, Dr. Sullivan reported to the ranch's board of directors. Her confidence has improved dramatically. Her communication skills have expanded, and most importantly, she's learned to trust again. Caesar's presence gives her a sense of security that has allowed her to open up to other relationships as well. Sarah Martinez had won a Pulitzer Prize for her coverage of the ranch story, but she had used her platform to continue advocating for both animal welfare and disability rights. She visited the ranch regularly, documenting Emily's progress and the facility's transformation into a world-class research and conservation center. This story began with tragedy and desperation, Sarah had written in her award-winning series. But it became something much more powerful, a testament to the healing power of love, the intelligence and compassion of animals, and the resilience of the human spirit. Emily's daily routine now included not only her regular therapy sessions and educational activities, but also her role as a teacher and advocate. School groups from across Texas came to learn from her about both animal behavior and living successfully with disabilities. Her presentations, delivered through her advanced communication system, were inspiring audiences far beyond her age. Animals see us differently than people do, Emily had explained to a group of elementary students during a recent visit. They don't care if we walk differently or talk differently. They care about how we treat them and whether we're kind. Caesar saw something good in me that my father couldn't see, and that taught me that my value doesn't depend on other people's opinions. The relationship between Emily and Caesar continued to be the heart of the ranch's mission. Their daily interactions, now conducted in a specially designed area that ensured safety while allowing meaningful contact, drew visitors from around the world. The lion's protective instincts toward Emily never wavered, and their communication seemed to transcend the barriers between species. Jake Peterson had used his construction skills to build additional accessible facilities throughout the ranch, ensuring that visitors with disabilities could fully participate in all activities. His military background had also proven valuable in developing security protocols that protected both animals and humans while allowing for meaningful interactions. Linda Peterson had emerged as Emily's strongest advocate and closest confidant. The mother-daughter relationship they had developed was based on mutual respect, unconditional love, and shared experiences that had forged an unbreakable bond. Emily has taught me as much as I've taught her, Linda reflected during a magazine interview. She's shown me that strength comes in many forms and that the most powerful people are often those who overcome the greatest challenges with grace and dignity. The ranch's educational programs now served as a model for other facilities around the world. Representatives from conservation organizations, disability advocacy groups, and research institutions regularly visited to study the successful integration of wildlife conservation, therapeutic services, and educational outreach. Robert Mitchell, serving his community service at the Rehabilitation Center, had begun the long process of confronting his failures as a father and as a human being. His supervised visits with Emily, which had begun just 2 weeks earlier, were painful reminders of how close he had come to destroying the most precious thing in his life. "I don't know if Emily will ever forgive me," Robert had confided to his counselor. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself. But seeing her thriving with Jake and Linda, seeing how confident and happy she's become, I realized that my illness almost robbed the world of someone truly special." The visits were difficult for Emily as well, but with the support of her new family and her therapy team, she was learning to separate her father's illness from his identity as a person. The process would take time, but it was another example of her remarkable capacity for growth and healing. As autumn arrived at the ranch, bringing cooler temperatures and golden sunsets across the Texas landscape, Emily sat in her favorite spot. Overlooking Caesar's expanded habitat, the lion was now part of a pride that included 2 female lions who had been rescued from a bankrupt zoo, creating a more natural social environment for him while maintaining his special relationship with Emily. The transformation was complete, but the story was far from over. Emily's journey from an isolated, unwanted child to a confident young woman who inspired others was ongoing. Caesar's evolution from a traumatized circus animal to a therapeutic partner was continuing, and the ranch's mission to bridge the gap between human and animal welfare was expanding every day. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, just as it had on that evening months ago when Emily and Caesar first truly saw each other. But now, instead of being separated by barriers of fear and misunderstanding, they were united in a partnership that had changed both of their lives and touched the hearts of people around the world. 1 year after Caesar's heroic intervention transformed their lives, the Mitchell Safari Ranch was preparing for its most significant event yet, the grand opening of the Caesar's Pride Center for Human-Animal Therapeutic Partnerships. Emily, now 18 and radiating confidence, was scheduled to deliver the keynote address at the dedication ceremony. The morning dawned clear and beautiful, with the Texas sky providing a perfect backdrop for the celebration. Emily had spent weeks preparing her speech with Linda Peterson, who had become not just her adoptive mother, but her closest friend and strongest supporter. "Are you nervous about speaking to such a large audience?" Linda asked as she helped Emily prepare. Emily's response came through her tablet with remarkable confidence. "I am excited, not nervous. I have important things to say, and people need to hear them. Caesar taught me that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what's right even when you are scared." The ceremony began with remarks from Dr. Foster, whose research at the ranch had revolutionized scientific understanding of animal emotional intelligence. Marcus Thompson, now recognized as a leading expert in therapeutic animal programs, spoke about the transformation he had witnessed. 12 months ago, this ranch was a place of hidden desperation, Marcus told the assembled crowd. Today, it stands as proof that love can overcome any obstacle. Emily and Caesar didn't just save each other, they saved all of us by showing us what's possible when we open our hearts to unconventional connections. Sarah Martinez presented Emily with an advocacy award from the International Association of Disability Rights Organizations. Her Pulitzer Prize-winning coverage had brought global attention to Emily's story and the broader issues of animal welfare and disability rights. Before Emily's speech, Dr. Foster presented Caesar with the first-ever Animal Hero Medal, created specifically to honor his protective actions. While Caesar couldn't attend the ceremony in person, a bronze statue had been commissioned for the center's entrance, capturing the moment when he positioned himself between Emily and danger. Finally, Emily was introduced to thunderous applause. Her wheelchair had been equipped with a platform that elevated her to speaking height, ensuring everyone could see her clearly. "Good morning, everyone. My name is Emily Mitchell Peterson, and I want to tell you about my friend Caesar, who taught me the most important lesson of my life." She paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. "1 year ago, I believed that I was a burden to everyone around me. I thought my disabilities made me less valuable than other people. I was lonely, scared, and convinced that nobody could ever really love me because I was different." The audience was completely silent. Then something terrible almost happened to me, something that could have ended my story before I had a chance to discover who I really was. But in that moment of greatest danger, it wasn't another human who saved me. It was Caesar, a lion who had been hurt and abandoned just like I had been. Emily's voice grew stronger. "Caesar didn't save me because I was perfect or because I could walk or talk like other people. He saved me because he recognized something that my own father couldn't see, that every life has value, that every being deserves protection, and that love doesn't require perfection." Tears were visible throughout the audience. Over this past year, Caesar has continued to teach me through our friendship. He has shown me that communication doesn't always require words, that strength comes in many forms, and that the most powerful connections happen when we see past surface differences to the heart underneath. She gestured towards Caesar's habitat, where the magnificent lion was visible, resting in sunlight. Today, we are opening this center to create a place where other people can discover what I learned. That animals can be our greatest teachers, our most loyal friends, and our most powerful healers. They don't judge us for our limitations. They see our possibilities. The emotion in her synthesized voice was unmistakable. I want everyone here to know that if you have been told you are not good enough, if you have been made to feel like a burden, if you have been convinced that your differences make you less valuable, those voices are wrong. Caesar saw my worth when others couldn't, and there are people and animals in this world who will see yours too. Emily's final words rang out with perfect clarity. This center will be a place where healing happens, where connections are made, and where everyone learns that the greatest gift we can give each other is acceptance. We are all different, we are all valuable, and we all deserve to be protected and loved. Thank you, Caesar, for teaching me that. The standing ovation lasted for over 5 minutes, with many audience members openly weeping at the power of Emily's message. The ceremony concluded with a ribbon cutting at the center's entrance, where Emily was joined by Jake, Linda, Marcus, and the entire team. As the ribbon fell away, revealing the inscription, Caesar's Pride Center, where hearts heal and spirits soar, Emily felt a profound sense of completion. As the crowd dispersed, Emily returned to her favorite spot where she could see Caesar. In his habitat, the lion approached the fence and pressed his massive nose against the mesh. Emily reached out to touch the barrier, and for a moment, they simply existed together in peaceful understanding. "Thank you, my friend," Emily whispered. "Thank you for seeing me when nobody else could, and for teaching me that love is the most powerful force in the universe." Caesar's gentle chuff was his response, the same sound he had made during their first encounters. Their bond had saved them both and created a legacy that would inspire generations to see beyond differences to the connections that unite all living creatures. The sun was setting over the Texas landscape, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Instead of representing the end of a difficult day, the sunset symbolized the beginning of countless new days filled with hope, healing, and the extraordinary power of love between species. Dear friends, we hope that Emily and Caesar's extraordinary story has touched your hearts as deeply as it has touched ours. This incredible journey shows us that love knows no boundaries, that protection comes from the most unexpected places, and that every life has immeasurable value regardless of our differences. If this story moved you, we invite you to join our community by clicking the subscribe button and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Every day, we bring you true stories of courage, hope, and the unbreakable bonds that connect all living creatures. Don't miss our upcoming stories about remarkable friendships that prove love is truly universal. Hit that like button if Emily's message of acceptance and Caesar's protective love inspired you, and let us know in the comments which part of their journey touched you most. Together we can spread these messages of hope and show the world that every being deserves love, protection, and the chance to shine. Thank you for being part of this incredible community where every story matters and every voice is heard.